So we're done kind of the meat and potatoes of this webinar right now, Oliver. And thank you for providing your valuable insights. We do have a few questions in the queue right now, which I'd like to call those out and get your thoughts on them, Oliver. And then I'd ask the participants who are still on if you want to add in any additional questions at this point. We're running about 5 minutes to close right now. So we'll try to answer a few here before we close. And then if whatever's not answered, again, we'll put those into an email or a link that you can follow up and look at those responses. So Oliver, big question here from one of our participants. What is Oliver doing for Genesis in Germany besides consulting?
Not earning enough. That's the first answer. What am I doing for Genesis in Germany? Basically, I am the bridge, let's say, between Genesis and KfW, Genesis and the German government. And what I will be doing, we've been preparing since the end of October, beginning of November, we've been preparing a presentation, a relatively detailed presentation, including a financial model for the German government. We wanted to do a pre-teaser, but we've done a full presentation. The German government and KfW have seen, let's say, excerpts from it. I've had to give them, let's say, excerpts from it. They are interested. We've already looked at the financial model. PwC has looked at it as well. They like it. Yes, it'll be tweaked. So basically what I'm doing is I'm at the moment, I'm assisting Genesis to get debt secured by the German government and debt given by the German banks.
Great, thank you. We have another question here. If this is such a great investment, why is external financing so difficult? Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Why is what?
Financing the project so difficult?
We're talking about the quantum. I think if we talked about, let's say, a small 100 or 200 million or 300 million US dollar project, it's actually quite easy. I mean, I got a project finance in Canada about $340 million. I mean, literally, I did that in 6 months. Talking about 1.7 billion Canadian dollars, you've got to go through a specific process. And hey, $1 billion or close to $2 billion, that's a pretty fat check to write out. And remember, we're not talking to owners of banks. We're talking to their senior vice presidents and to their senior directors. And these guys are going to tick boxes. And let's say it is normal. In order to get this finance, it is normal from the beginning of a concept to getting financial close. It is normal to go through a 2-year vetting period. Because remember, banks just don't write checks on a whim. Everything has to be analyzed, and all the information that we're giving these people will have to be vetted again by external auditors or external experts in order to give, let's say, banks who are giving the money a certain amount of comfort.
Mm-hmm. Great. Here's a bit of a financing one. I think this is a pretty good question. Is the rising cost of interest going up with inflation in the projections?
Good question. What we've done, you see, this is in the projections we have, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we've used a 2.5% inflation factor. It could, let's say, go up, yes. But let's say, remember that the US government is horribly in debt. European governments are horribly in debt. And the higher the interest rates go, yes, it spurs on investment, but it makes it more difficult for countries who are overloaded in debt to serve the interest on debt. So this is something which we need to discuss with the IMF, not we, but this is something that the IMF at the end of the day needs to decide. And of course, the US Federal Reserve Bank. But we don't expect that interest rates will go out of control, especially in today's financial climate. We have, yes, a short-term inflationary rise for two reasons. Number one, Corona, the pandemic, which let's say is sort of over. And of course, what is going to slap us across the head badly, especially over the next 6 to 8 months, is the war in the Ukraine. But once that is, again, I feel it's transitory. Once that, let's say, blows away and it's business as normal, I think we'll be still looking at anywhere between, let's say, 1-2% inflation per annum. One thing I'd like to say is that once we get this loan, this is the reason why I'd like, let's say, to address the debt as quickly as possible, is that once we get financial close, we lock in the interest rates, and that's important.
Right. Okay, so I want to end off on one last question. I know we're slightly over our time, and I appreciate all of you staying on and the rest of our participants. Before I get to that, there was one individual that's put their hand up in the participant queue. I just asked that person if they have a question to put it in the Q&A box, because we're not opening it up for live discussion at this point. So one last question before I close things off. Oliver, what do you believe are the principal risks for an investor in this project? And we're talking to our farmer investors.
You've got many risks. Let's start with political risk. Is that big or small? Off-take risk is a big risk. In other words, the most important factor of this project is off-take, because off-take means that there is enough cash flow to repay the debt. So off-take is elemental. Number three, as I alluded before, is, are we using brand new technology? Is this a Tesla, which may, let's say, after 6 months of getting this car on the road, it explodes and burns not only me and my family up because the batteries, let's say, explode. No, we're talking about proven technology. Number three, one major risk is, let's say, gas prices. Let's assume gas prices explode in Canada. It could happen. I can't exclude that as a fact. But if gas prices explode in Canada, just imagine what it will do in the US. Just imagine what will happen in the Middle East or in North Africa. In other words, Canada will always be the lowest gas prices worldwide. And the last risk, which is very important, that we look at here, let's say at your Genesis urea plant project overview, are under key requirements: long-term gas, natural supply, proven ammonia technology. We've done that. Experienced EPC contractor. Obviously, if the sponsors pick somebody, and this is where the banks are very, very sensitive, pick somebody who has not got a proven track record to build an ammonia urea plant, he or they will not be considered. Yes, you will get one or the other delays. Yes, there will be, let's say, startup problems. But remember, with all these problems, this will be factored in to your debt. In other words, there is usually anywhere between, depending on how the banks see it, between a 12 and 20% contingency, which senior lenders will insist on to be included in your capital expenditure, in your capex. Next risk is, of course, that you've got some clown running the plant. No, you will not get this financed if you don't have an experienced operational maintenance plant operator. In other words, it won't even get off the ground. In other words, you've got to nominate an experienced O&M plant operator, which I'm not, which Genesis isn't. In other words, we've got to get expertise from the outside. And the last and most important thing, which I alluded to right at the beginning, is long-term take-or-pay offtake contracts. In other words, if a farmer listening here will put in, let's say, equity, against that equity, he will get what we call tonnage allocation, and he will have to take or pay for that urea allocation. In other words, if he doesn't take it, he's going to pay. This is a guaranteed offtake. Why? We need a take or pay offtake contract in order to ensure that we've got the cash flow to pay our debt. Now, how long will it take to pay off this debt? Well, normally we run an average of about 9.5 years. It's including interest, or 5.5 years if we're talking about the debt, to pay off the debt. In 2006, we built an ammonia plant. It was finished at the end of 2006. We came on 2007, 2008. All I can tell you, we paid off debt and interest within 24 months. That can happen, okay? So yes, these are the risks. The last risk is, of course, we go to key assumptions, is that the long-term price of urea is not 676, which I mentioned, let's say before, which I lowballed intentionally, because I didn't want some fancy urea consultant to say, no, what Oliver's done here is completely nonsense. The price is 500. I lowballed it by at least $100 to $150 a ton over a period of 15 years. Your cash costs, well, if you look to the right of your urea cash cost benchmarking, your cash cost is similar to CF in Donaldsonville with the same technology, is similar to Nutrien and Redwater, and is similar to Yarra and Belle Plaine. In other words, we haven't started, let's say, off from a very low platform. We are, let's say, in the lower quartile of the incumbents worldwide.
Great. We're a fair bit over our time. I'm going to there's one last question here I'd like to answer. It's a real quick one. I'm going to take this answer, Oliver, just so you know. What would the cost of the fertilizer to a non-investor be? We alluded to at the beginning, our intention is to go out at market. So whatever the current market price out there, if you're a non-investor in this project, that's what you're going to pay. We want to make sure that we keep the economics the same as far as what the other players, the competitors in the market out there. And we actually would love to keep as much value between the production costs and the retail price to the farmer in there, so that the farmers who do invest in this project can reap the rewards of participating along the value chain. Again, thank you, Oliver, for spending the time with me today and our participants on this call. There are a number of questions that we have in our Q&A box. One of my colleagues has jotted all those questions down, and we'll endeavor to get responses to those questions and their questions over the course of the next few days, probably into early next week. And I want to thank everyone for attending today, and especially Oliver for sharing your valuable insight and expertise. And thank you very much, and have a great day. I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you very much.